I welcome you all in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. VMKD, through its vision and mission of kindness and divinity, intends to aggrandize the voice of the CSI members by putting across initiatives to enrich our being as a diocese. Today, as we are stretching out our initiatives to a new string of events, we are honored to have an interview with Rev.Prof.Dr.Jerry Pillay, who holds the office as the General Secretary of the World Council of Churches. He is a Reformed pastor and a member of the Uniting Presbyterian Church in Southern Africa. Reverend Pillay is in Kottayam as a part of the Christian Conference of Asia that seeks to bring together members of the Christian churches and the National Council of Churches from across Asia. He delivered the keynote address at the General Assembly of the CCA and also had meaningful time of interaction with the bishops of the Diocese of the Churches of South India. We're extremely happy to welcome such a distinguished guest to our platform. Sir, greetings to you from VMKD.
Thank you.
Sir, you hold an apex office in the World Council of Churches. Do give us a brief profile of the WCC.
The World Council of Churches was constituted in 75 years ago, in 1948. So this is our 75th anniversary.
That's right.
It started just after the Cold War, when church leaders said, well, we need to be doing something in the world to ensure that we do not have the experiences and recurrence of wars.
Right.
And so in 1948, the WCC was established. And ever since then, it started to grow and grow. And today we have 352 members who are part of the fellowship. We have in 120 countries member churches, and together in total we have almost 600 million people who are part of the fellowship itself. Our main task is to proclaim Jesus Christ to the world, and as we seek to do that, we seek to work for the unity of Christians, and that's the miracle of the WCC, that 352 churches can work together, all of them really different from each other, with great senses of complexities and diversity, but yet are able to come together and establish the common mission in Jesus Christ and proclaim a common witness to the world. And the world is in serious trouble, and it is therefore important to have a Christian witness that speaks to the suffering, the brokenness, and the pain in the world itself. And the amazing thing is that these different churches are able to work together and make decisions that actually speaks in a way of visible Christian unity to the world itself. Of course, the challenges are enormous. There are great complexities, but by God's grace, we are able to speak to the world.
As a part of the Anglican Communion, I understand that the CSI has a dynamic participation in the WCC. If we list out and categorize the different churches, what categories find a place in the WCC and which ones stay away from the WCC?
Well, we don't really work with categories,
Right.
Not at all. This is why the structures are so set that churches, even the least in terms of numbers, are able to participate as much as possible and as fully as possible in the WCC. We basically try to provide a space for as many people as possible. So therefore we don't kind of really work with proportions of size, but what does matter is that we give equal opportunity to everybody who is part of the fellowship. And that's precisely what we do. It's not easy, it's complex, because you would find that churches that are in majority in numbers often want to have more spaces and seats, and which we try to accommodate because it's sensible to do. But in the same breath, every time we have elections, which is every 8 years, we have to make sure that churches that were not given an opportunity in the previous year or years are given more concentration and consideration in terms of elections. So we provide space for all member churches, and of course we consistently have new people joining us as well. and they are given seats as observers whilst they are seeking membership. But generally, we try to be as broad as possible. So there's no real categories as such. That doesn't really exist.
Okay.
But of course, I must admit that there are some predominant churches, not only just by numbers, but also by church traditions, and they believe that they should be given more space than others. But I think we try to balance it out.
Okay, that's right. As you said, the WCC was founded in 1948. What can be considered as a philosophy of WCC?
Well, you know, our main task together is to bring transformation to the world. Our real task is to not only work for the unity of churches and Christians, but also to work for the unity of the human race. And in that, we are busy with issues of justice. We work with eco-justice, we work with economic justice, we work with gender justice. All of these things are important to deal with these injustices of the world. So unity and justice are the key things. And in that, we ensure that we are dealing now, especially in this time when we face an emergency climate crisis, we are putting more energies and effort into working on that. The last General Assembly of the World Council of Churches, which took place in Karlsruhe in Germany last year, decided that climate crisis is something that we should be working with quite intentionally. So we have established a commission on climate emergency and sustainable development, which includes, of course, a whole lot of other dimensions of things that one has to address in the world. So the one planet aspect is an important focus at the moment, but we also are very serious about the involvement of young people. So we have changed our structures, particularly in the governance level, to include young people. For example, we have included 18 more youth in the decision-making process of the Central Committee. And they are as advisors, but they have a voice. We also are working with indigenous people and with people with disabilities. So we are focusing on those areas that has been given less consideration over the years. The marginalized matter much to us. We are dealing with issues of racism and xenophobia, casteism. That is the Assembly asked us to actually revive and resurface our focus in these specific areas. And even here in India, in my time here, there's been conversations, especially from the CSI, that we should revive our focus on the Dalit community.
That's right.
And that's something that we will be taking very seriously.
Okay. So that said, my next question is again something pertaining to what you just said right now. We are in India, Kerala, and systems tend to be a bit conservative here. I'd like to know, what is the stand WCC takes while dealing with such controversial issues like gay marriages, women ordination, divorce, abortion, and the like?
Well, I mean, you know, the issue of human sexuality particularly has been the most disturbing one and most divisive one for churches. And very often we cannot actually accept different views on this. The WCC does not necessarily take a position on these matters.
That's right.
What we do is that we allow our member churches to make their decisions, their particular stance in terms of how they decide about these matters. But we are very embracing, because we realize that whilst we deal with these issues of gay marriages and divorce and all of these matters, that whilst we may be more open-minded and embracive of these experiences of people, and they are real life experiences of people, which we don't want to deny, it also infringes on the issues of human dignity and human rights. And we have to understand that from a biblical perspective too. So the WCC is very much embracive of the different views on this. But we do not take a particular position to say we are for this or we are against that. We rather leave that to the churches to be able to establish and proclaim and pronounce their particular views on the matters. But we do know that even among these churches that take certain stances that are less conservative in their approach, face serious problems. There are many churches that have actually divided on the issue of sexuality, for example, which is very sad. But that's the reality. So we provide a space for people with different views to come together and dialogue.
That's right.
I think that's the most important thing. Because we're so bent on building unity, we accept that unity is not uniformity, that there are great divergent and differences of views. So the idea is that the WCC would create a platform for people to come with these different views, and instead of being divided, to ask how in God's name can we work together. And it works.
To engage in a dialogue.
It works because we've had some difficult decisions in our last Central Committee. For example, the question of human sexuality was really going to create a great sense of divide. You know, the Orthodox family and people from Pentecostal backgrounds, and especially from Africa, have very conservative views about gay marriages and so forth, even accepting lesbians and gay people. But we've been able to make decisions that has preserved the unity of the churches, has preserved the unity of the fellowship, and yet also embraces the people concerned who are different in some of these ways.
Thank you. That's right. So, just out of curiosity, your surname was a surprise for all of us, and it's a very familiar name in Kerala. Would you like to say something about your ancestry and personal life?
Yeah, I'm South African, born in South Africa. My parents were born in South Africa. We go back about 5 generations in South Africa. So the only thing we do know is South Africa.
Okay.
But we do know that our descendants came from India, and they came as indentured laborers actually in South Africa in the sugarcane fields. But today they own the sugarcane fields. It is a thriving business that Indians have taken over. That's the most important thing about Indians. You put them into a space and then they own it. And that's a good thing. So that's where it started. But I have tried to look at my roots. My brother actually has done some research as part of his university studies, but he really was inconclusive. So some say, I'm here in Kerala. Some say I might be in the south, Tamil Nadu. For me, it doesn't matter really.
Okay.
The important thing is my background is from Indian roots.
Right. So you have a graceful track record as an ordained pastor, a theologian, a teacher, administrator, and so on. We would like to know something about your personal faith and evolution in Christian ministry.
Well, the Christian faith has always been an important source of my life. Right from the age of 10, I already knew that I was going to go into ministry, one day to be ordained as a minister in the church. And I grew up with that all my years at school. I tried to run away from that after getting my matriculation. And God said, no, you got to be where I want you to be. And that for me has always been the position. I've always been prayerful. I've always said to God, I want to be where you want me to be. I want to fulfill what you have called me to do. My life has always been a life of that submissive obedience to God. And I think it is that has actually created spaces for me to excel in so many different areas. I pride in deep spirituality. I make no compromise in terms of my faith and my devotion. I've been a pastor for about 25 years in 2 congregations, and that has helped me over the years to keep my spiritual journey. And even when I went into the academic world, I always ensured that my spirituality was nurtured and cared for. I was a bit crazy because even though I was the dean of a faculty of theology and religion, I preached virtually every weekend. And people said, you are really crazy to do this. But I said it helps my spirituality. It helps me when I prepare a sermon, allow God to speak to me, allow the Spirit to work in me. So for me, faith, spirituality are the founding aspects of my life. I'm always prayerful. I always enter into anything and everything I do with lots of talking to God. And especially with this job that I do, I consider it to be a calling. One has to talk to God every day.
Right.
You need strength, you need spiritual strength, you need physical strength, you need wisdom, and that can only come from the real source of all of those, and that's God.
I'm a teacher and I have a passion for eco-criticism, which is primarily an interdisciplinary study that combines ecology and literary criticism. Our own field of English studies has undergone tremendous changes. The church too has changed in its dynamics in penetrating into many of these fields. Is the church able to make inroads into the secular world, or are these moves seen with doubt by other agencies?
Well, I think in the first place, the church has a responsibility to enter into the secular space. The reason being, this is God's world, and everything belongs to God. So we may work with clear demarcation and say this is God's and this is not God's, and this is spiritual and this is not spiritual, this belongs to the church and this doesn't belong to the church. But no, I disagree with that. I believe that all of history, all of life is God's history, God's life. And if we are to take the scriptures very seriously, God created this world. So therefore, for me, there's no dichotomy between the spiritual and the secular. So the church has to be there. The church has to make a difference there. Yes, of course, at times, the secular world does not take you seriously, and they want to be different. But it is our responsibility to say to them, no, that is not the case. You have to consider influence of spirituality and religion in whatever you do. For example, the United Nations for a long time took a position of trying to say we will not focus on religion. But I can tell you in the last few years, they have started to realize that that is wrong. It's a wrong approach. Because religion brings certain nuances to these conversations. It brings issues of ethics and morality, let alone spirituality, into this. But if you have to understand the whole person has to be integrated, and you cannot neglect the spiritual life as if it doesn't belong into everything else. So therefore, the UN has even changed its tack. I mean, in my offices in Geneva, people from UN are working with my staff all the time. There's just wonderful collaboration. And they tend to us to say, listen, come and tell us what we can do about children's ministry. Come and tell us what we can do about climate change. Come and tell us about issues of peace and justice in war-torn areas and places. So we do that. We really integrated in all of these different dimensions. So yes, I believe that the dichotomy between spiritual and secular is a false dichotomy. The church is called to be involved in all of these things. For many years, those who actually advocated that the church must not be involved in society, and the church needs to be aloof and be, excluded from all of these things, have now come to the understanding that that doesn't work. We are political beings, we are social beings, all of us in our full composition, everything in life impacts upon us, and therefore we have to work with that. So any organizations that are secular that wants to speak about being independent also live under false assumptions. Any Christians likewise who believe that we should have no right and responsibility into speaking into the secular field live in a false world. It's not the real world. Real spirituality is integrated with real life living and life experiences. Okay. So I believe that that's precisely what needs to happen.
Okay. So with your involvement and interest in the church scenario in India, what do you think are the challenges that churches in India face? Is there an advice you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that I've noticed that are issues in India, but also more particularly in the wider Asian context. Like here in Kerala, for example, the issue of migration is a big one. I've heard repeatedly people say to me, we are concerned our young people are leaving once they get educated or they go out for education and they are moving out of the space. And it's not going to be long from now when this wonderful space is going to be full of just elderly folk. And of course that impacts on the economy, it impacts on life in general. So that's a big issue, migration. And there's different aspects to migration. Yeah, I think there's a concern of people leaving the country. Equally, on the global aspect, we have other countries that are saying, we also have a problem of migration, but our problem is that we're receiving all of these people. So the global aspect of migration is a big issue. It may affect different contexts in different ways, but I think it is a bigger issue in terms of the church trying to address that. And for us at the WCC, we are putting as much of concentration and energy into these discussions as well, from the different angles and positions. I think also in this particular context, the issue of religious tolerance, religious freedom is a problem. Christians are in a minority in India. In Kerala, I'm told that you are a bigger percentage, which I think is a good experience. But by and large, in the country itself, Christians are in minority, and we know that they have had some challenges. Unfortunately, even it seems that some of the policies or some of the reactions of politicians are not helping the situation by enforcing particular religions, dominant religions, which actually creates people to react in ways that are not acceptable in dealing with not only just Christians but even with Muslims for that matter. So minority faiths are at a peril in terms of possible attacks, which we have seen in some parts of India, and that is a major concern as well. But there are some really positive sides. I mean, I've been impressed to see young people. I've been impressed to see children in the church. Yesterday I had the opportunity to preach in the cathedral, the CSI, and I was so impressed to see so many young people, so many children, so many in the choir, and I thought, this doesn't exist in some parts of the world. In some parts of the world, children and youth have lost interest in the church. I'm pleased to see that it is here. And then of course the climate crisis is a big issue. And I'm particularly excited to see that even in the Assembly of the Christian Conference of Asia, that they used the theme creation, God to restore the creation and to revive God's spirit in us. And that too is a good indication that in the Asian context that we are starting to talk about climate challenges. But of course there are gender issues and gender justice issues as well. I would long to see the leadership of women in the church become a major attraction and understanding and acceptance. But we have to contend with the fact that churches have different views about this, and the WCC respects that. But whilst we do respect that, we also like to challenge our thinking about that, widen our sense of education about that, engage theological reflection on these subjects, because I believe that women are equally called by God, and all people are created in the image of God, and therefore everybody should be given the space and the opportunity to exercise their God-given gifts and callings as fellow human beings, but as fellow Christians in the context of the church.
Okay. I'm sure you will have a message for the churches and the people of India and Kerala. Would you share your dreams and visions about us?
Well, you know, the good thing about the Indian context here is that spirituality is a very strong aspect, whether it is Christian or whether it is otherwise in any other religion for that matter. I think we need to keep our spirituality and continue to build on that. I think that in this context you have a lot to teach us about inter-religious dialogue and collaboration. I think it's a gift that you can give to us and give to the world on how minority religions can continue to be strengthened in their witness and in the practice as Christians, and be able to say to the rest of the world that this is something we can offer to you in your particular situations as well. And I think all of those aspects. And then there's so much of things that are actually very prevalent in this context. I've been deeply intrigued by education and theological education. I've been excited to see that there are so many theological seminaries, and most of the churches have one or more theological seminaries, and they have students. This is also something that is waning, in other parts of the world. And I think that needs to be encouraged and sustained. But also, I was at the school yesterday of CSI, CMS, and I was wonderfully pleased to know that even the church had given the idea of a university even before the country did. And I think that's powerful, very powerful. So the point is that churches can make a huge contribution to the development of people and land and country and world. And we should not underestimate what we bring in the development of this world. As I said, it's God's world.
Okay. So it was an honor for VMKD to have this time with you. I pray for your ministry and praise God for you. Do convey our greetings to all at WCC and uphold us in your prayers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an opportunity to be able to speak to you. And I trust and pray that the good work that I've seen in this part of the world will continue.
Thank you.